what if some of the world's biggest brands, what if some of the world's biggest brands can in fact stand up and be part of the change? So um, I wrote a book called, I'm just trying to get the keys here to work. Let's see now. Just give me 2 seconds. Great. You know, that's what happens when you suddenly have a thing that's being recorded, as you all saw. That did create a little slight technical problem in my end, but no worries whatsoever. I will see how we can get to, but as a few more people arriving, we just started with the presentation with a slight little technical thing, which is okay. We will get there. So great. So we will just do that again, and we will be there in just 1 second. This always, even though it's been done a million times before, this can happen. So now we're actually up and working again. So as I said, I wrote a book called Good Advertising. Basically, a book kind of depicting this change and really saying, hey, wait a moment, brands are changing in a sustainable direction. And as we probably all see today, all of this has become extremely mainstream. So where to go from here? Because if we basically look at the market today, it kind of looks a little bit like this. All these brands and startups out there talking about ocean plastics and look at me, I'm doing something for the poor children in Africa, or look at me, I stand for pride. And when you showcase yourself and say, hey, look at all the good stuff we're doing, it actually doesn't look that good. Because the challenge is, if you stand up on that hero's pedestal and you say, hey, look at me, dear customer, dear client, I'm going to save the world, there's a pretty big chance that you're going to fall down, that you're not moving fast enough, that you're not going far enough. So often people say, hey, wait a moment, you know, maybe if we through actions demonstrate that we committed. But as a small startup, you can maybe do that. But most of the time, the fewest products and services are really that innovative, because if they were, you wouldn't really be needing advertising that much. So that's what I basically call the hero trap in my latest book. And this can also be quite a nice opportunity for all of you in this call, because if you think about it, a lot of the big brands out there don't do this very well. So you can use it against them. You know, say, for example, Johnny Walker want to do something for women. So obviously they reframe one of their very well-known brands, Johnny Walker, and call it Jane Walker. And I think all of us can probably look through that. And secondly, I mean, from an advertising perspective, our industry haven't really had the best history of women and equality. I mean, this is actually a real ad from about 40 years ago. You mean a woman can open it? And in this case, apparently talking about how easy this little screw lid is. But why I'm sharing this is, in fact, that a lot of people are losing trust in big brands. And that's an opening for you guys. If you take some of the startups back in the days, I'm sure you all know Ben and Jerry's. These are actually the two founders, Ben and Jerry in memory. What they talk about is, in fact, they want to make the best possible ice cream in the nicest possible way. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved Ben and Jerry's. But today, does that mission, does that leadership really ring true? The best possible ice cream? Not really. I mean, just across the street from where I live, I probably have 3 to 4 other ice cream makers. So that kind of makes Ben and Jerry's look like a pretty commoditized, bland product. And yet still, they talk so much about all the big role that they want to play in people's lives. So there's no doubt about it. The more we see people talking about it, brands talking about all the good stuff they're doing, it seems like people are more skeptical. It could be fun also in the chat to obviously hear your remarks about this, whether you think that you are becoming more skeptical about all of these big claims. But the interesting thing as well is really the shift in mindsets. And we know, and these are US numbers from a report called the Good Life Report, that 56% of people actually want to buy from purposeful companies, but only 26% follow through. So there's a gap of 39%, a 39% market potential if we get this right, if you guys out there get this right. So one curious question I asked myself when writing the new book was, what brand, leader, organization have really created change in my life? And this is a question I want you to ask yourself as well. What brand, organization, or leader have actually really created change in your life? Because if there's so many brands all saying, you know, we are Mother Teresa, we are Gandhi, we're Jesus, how come they're not? How come we can't mention that many brands, in fact? But this challenge is maybe not that strange, because we as humans are not the easiest in creating change. And I think a lot of brands is about change, because if you just take the New Year's pledge, for example, most often the New Year's pledge is really just the beginning to bad old habits, right? So for example, probably for me, you know, each and every year I promise, you know, hey, I want to go exercise, I want to go running, but like 2-3 weeks into January, I'm still there. The Nike running shoes are still lying there in the corridor. But there's a shift happening right now. And one of the brands that actually helped me change my life, I'm going to share with you today, because I used to be, before the pandemic, obviously traveling all the time. So how could I maybe minimize my climate footprint a little bit? And I love cooking. So I wanted to eat more plant-based. And one of the companies that helped me do that is a company called Årstiderne. In Danish, it means seasons. And what they do is they do these farm fresh, these boxes with farm fresh produce delivered at your door. But it also comes with a recipe. And they have actually, I would say, taught me to be a fairly good plant-based chef. And most of the time it comes out like this, and I'll share it on Instagram. You can see that on my feed, and I'm incredibly proud. The reality with change, though, is that most of the time, quite frankly, it's probably looks a little bit more like this. But when you listen to what Austin is saying, they're not standing up on the pedestal and saying, you know, we're going to change the world, or we're in the business to save X, Y, Z. When I interviewed their founder, he talks about something he called Earth Connection, which is something I had to find myself. It was a shared journey. It was a conversation between me and Austin. So if we look at how that really, this shift is really changing products and services and how those are positioned, we're not going to talk about the functional benefits and emotional benefits, but where my last book, Good Advertising, stopped was at the societal benefits. So, for example, a more environmentally friendly car. So that could be the Prius, that could be the Tesla. But when everybody is pitching that story, how can you then differentiate yourself? And that's exactly why I believe we are approaching what I would call a transformational difference. It's really helping me achieve my dreams and aspirations, or overcoming challenges or obstacles. And that's really the transformational difference. It's putting me at the center and helping me go further. And it's two different, fundamentally different ways of looking at leadership, where most brands out there say, look at us, believe in us as an organization to bring about change. Whereas a transformational brand says, believe in your own ability to bring about change. So I'm going to share a little tool with you, a little cheat trick here that I think will really stand a good chance in the fight against big brands. And I call it the arrow. And the arrow was in fact inspired by psychotherapy and coaching. And it asks 4 fundamental questions. So the first question probably shouldn't give you too much of a headache. So what is it that you do? So those might be the products or services. Those might be the running shoes. How are you unique in delivering your product or service? So these are typically the unique selling propositions. I'm sure if you work with the business canvas or any other thing, I'm sure that you have a pretty clear about what it is. Maybe Maybe your little vodka is local, or it's made, maybe you launch something that was plant-based. But the fundamental question that I want you to ask is really not taking an inside out approach and ask, why are you doing what you're doing? But really asking, who can you help people become? How can you push people further? And the fourth question is, when do you enable this change? Because change without a deadline is really not successful. When? It might be at a specific time of day. If you take IKEA, they talk about sustainable living every day. So the outcome of this, I call a transformational promise, and it's your organization's promise to enable change. And I'll give you one example of an organization that's been extremely successful at that. And obviously, this is a big brand. It's called Discovery. It's one of the most innovative health insurance companies. And what they tell people is incentivizing you and me to live healthier. So incentivizing you and me to live healthier. And they've been incredibly successful at that. One of the products they have is a program called Vitality. So instead of a classic reward program, basically what they're doing is they are rewarding you for each and every time you, for example, go to the gym, or if you buy healthy fruits and vegetables. And in that way, they've been extremely good at balancing purpose and profit. And I think this is a challenge that a lot of impact entrepreneurs are thinking about. How do you get that balance right? The interesting thing is the more successful they are at getting their clients to live healthier, the less they pay in premiums. So when you ask that key question, who can you help people become? It's about playing a meaningful role in people's lives. And this is where you really can differentiate yourself. And there's many ways you can play a meaningful role in people's lives. And this is really based, as I said, in psychotherapy and coaching. So it can be about having a sense of home. It can be about delivering mindfulness. It can be about contributing to society. There's a startup that I interviewed in the book called District Vision, for example. They basically do pretty well-designed running glasses, but that's exactly not what they're selling. What they sell is mindful running. This idea that, and I'm sure that a lot of you on the call can recognize this, that if your mind is like going all these weird places and you're mentally giving up because you're like doing this to the next lamppost, the next lamppost, the next lamppost, you're not going to be a very good runner. So that's the niche that they have found. So ask yourself as a startup, if you have found your meaningful role that you want to play. Let me give you an example. For example, LS, which is a company that started in the UK, and in a matter of 5 years become the best selling baby food product brand in the UK. Quite an amazing story. But Paul really created this company because he got a young daughter, Ella, and thought, wait a moment, why is there only so much bad food for Ella out there? So he went on a mission to help Ella and other kids like her to get healthy food and discover that healthy food can be fun. So a very, very clear role to play. Or take Sodastream. I'm sure all of you know Sodastream. It was one of the things I really begged my parents to get when I was a kid. Then it did seem like it disappeared out of the market for a while, but suddenly came back with a new role to play in people's lives. And if there's any Game of Thrones fan out there, you will know Mountain from Game of Thrones. And basically what Sodastream here is saying, fuck plastic bottles. Sorry about the cursing, that are actually the true words from that commercial. So they are up against fighting plastic bottles. So another who word can be, for example, anything from finance to home to emotional well-being, even to romance. And if you think about it, most dating apps out there are for men. But what if that whole dating game could be turned around and one could get rid of those really awkward pictures? And there we have Bumble, a female-friendly dating app. So again, a really clear role to play in people's lives. And why I'm so fascinated about this is that you're not standing up on a pedestal and saying, we're going to do X, Y, Z. Instead, it's a journey where we embark, you and I, together, and really trying to understand how you can bridge that gap with the 39%. Because by the end of the day, It's about changing lives for the better, and it's about ultimately also, obviously, getting your products and services relevant in people's lives. And I did a piece of research to kind of understand this a little bit better. So I compared two types of commercials. One, what I would call a purposeful commercial. This is a commercial from a very big brand, Budweiser. This was aired during Super Bowl. Most expensive ad break in the world. It's astonishing how much money it costs just to air 1 second. And they talk about this, but for a better tomorrow. And I got so extremely tired of a lot of the BS language that I hear in sustainability most of the time. I mean, tomorrow better, blah blah blah, and it's really, really not believable. And if we compare that to what I would call a transformational commercial, this is from one of Procter & Gamble's brands called Always, obviously trying to speak to this transition from being a young girl to being a woman, and really wanted to change the meaning of the sentence "like a girl." Run like a girl would unfortunately be by many perceived as weaker, so you're not a good runner. And they really wanted to change that conversation and give these young girls, women, the confidence. And when kind of comparing those commercials, it was quite an interesting finding, because if we looked at brand warmth, how people receive the message, they did fairly well, all of them. At competence, same thing. So even though the brand doesn't talk about itself always, for example, but talk about the girls out there and the role they want to play in girls' lives, people still think that Always is a competent brand. But the most interesting is when we look at motivation, because in fact, there is a high jump. So people feel on average 29.4% more motivated by a transformational message. And people are also on average 29.6% more willing to pay a premium price. And I think that's interesting, because if we look at Årstiderne, the cases she had earlier with the boxes, the interesting thing there is that there's quite a few competitors right now in the Danish market, yet again, I'm really not that price sensitive. And why I think this is also important is that we live in really fast changing times. And I think the pandemic has probably been quite a necessary wake up call for us, because the best things in life aren't things. And I think a lot of us are waking up and realizing that. I mean, I'm sure that quite a few on this call have embraced different things during the pandemic. I mean, if you look at YouTube, they have something called the sourdough index that shows how many people are looking at videos how to do proper sourdough bread on YouTube. But what's so interesting about it is that, in fact, that most of us are driven by, self-actualization. We do things because we're passionate about it. I mean, I like surfing. I'm not getting paid for surfing, but I like being out there on the waves. And I think it's a really important thing, like we see with Årstiderne. So if you want to play a meaningful role in people's lives, this is key. And it's also key that you're not selling, but you're actually trying to deliver real, meaningful value. And in a space where brick and mortar stores are failing these days, it's actually not so curious for me, because what are really the function of most stores today? I mean, you go into a store and you have some store clerk that's most of the time not really that informed. And it's really just a sort of transactional thing. You're waiting there in line, you're buying your shoes. Why not just buy that online? But what if retail also thought about how they could deliver transformation, change in our lives? And let me share one case from Canada. It's a brand called Respect Your Universe. It's really quite a fascinating story, because what Respect Your Universe is talking about is really saying that most sports brands, again, a meaningful role to play, most sports brands is about athleticism. When I go into a sports retail, I always feel like a little out of place, because maybe I want to pick up playing paddle or whatever, and I go there and you have this store clerk that's like a super paddle pro, and you feel like a little bit intimidated. Instead, what Respect Your Universe does is that it's a very inclusive community. So everybody who's working there kind of resembling society in general. And one of the things they do in their store is, in fact, that they want to help you achieve your life goals, no matter what they are. If you're a couch potato and you want to go for a walk, that's fine. So they even opened up the stores for the community. So let's say that Abby is, I'm sure you are, Abby, a really good kickboxer, then you can invite a lot of people down into the store. And if enough people sign up, yes, Abby got her kickboxing class, and I would definitely also be joining. So kind of changing how you look at stores. Secondly, a thing they do is, let's say that your goal was to lose weight and you can't fit your pants, then you can go in there and you can change them for free. Another thing that's another really good example of this is actually a store that's just off the street from where I'm living. I'm sure we all know IKEA for their crazy mega malls, the labyrinth that you have to kind of go through, and you're risking your relationship for every little corner in that labyrinth. But IKEA has been on quite a change journey as well, and they really want to deliver sustainable living to more than 1 billion people across the world. And it's always been about democratic and today sustainable furniture. So they've opened up this little store space in central Copenhagen. It's 150 square meters, and basically what's in there are a couple of designers sitting ready by their laptops to help you get your dream home going. So again, a clear role for them to play, to own the home and what they could do at home. And it's really just a bigger change as well in society in general, because if we look at our cities, if we look at the internet, it's so disappointing to see that it's all about commerce. It's all about selling. I mean, if we think about what we can actually do in a city without money, there aren't a lot. But city planners are even starting to think about this, how they can transform citizens. So this is a picture from Copenhagen, but I see this across the world, South America, Asia, city gyms popping up, and really cities trying to help citizens live healthier lives. So now we got your leadership fixed in there, the who, finding a meaningful role to play in people's lives, looking at the arrow. Second thing is media space. And there you have a real advantage because you can much easier than the big brands put people first. Because if we think about it, the situation in media space looks a little bit like this because we have the power. The amount of stuff that we upload on the internet really outspends all that media spend from the big commercial players. So I want you to look at the whole marketing mix that you have today in a completely different way. And this is really good because if you're not that far in your journey, you have every opportunity to do this. So this is what I call the wheel. So that's the second tool I'm going to share with you here today. In the middle of the wheel is what I call the Transformational Promise. So for discovery, that could be incentivizing people to live healthier. But this is really about giving away the power to people, making people participate, because there's nothing worse than being told what to do or being delivered a prefab product. We are more engaged when we have a say. I mean, think about it. In the early days of your work life, probably there was nothing worse than a boss just coming there and like giving you the papers and saying, fix this. People feel demotivated. So how can you open up for the whole marketing mix for people's creativity, passion, and play? And let me give you an example of a company that's done that in a fascinating way. It's a company called Wheelies. And Wheelies was founded by a young girl called Marie Delacroix. She actually wanted to work at Starbucks, the typical millennial passionate about purpose. But she didn't get a job at Starbucks because her hair was green. Apparently not okay in Starbucks. But she said, went out on another passionate mission. She said, if I can't get a job at Starbucks, maybe I can beat Starbucks at their own game. So she created this amazing little bicycle cafe concept. But what was so clever about it is that it was really about making each and every one of us into entrepreneurs, for us to buy in to the Wheelies Cafe and start our own business. And if you think about it, starting at Starbucks, it's quite a big out-of-pocket expense. I'm not sure that if you're going to ask your mom and dad for $500,000, you'll get that. But maybe if you beg a little bit, you could get $5,000 so you can fundraise that on the Kickstarter. So that way, what Marie Delacroix thought was, let me enable and open up this and create a sort of micro franchise for each and everyone out there. It's really been fascinating for me to talk to some of those wheelers because it's really driven by a lot of people's individual dreams. So it's not the typical franchises that we see out there. So for example, in Denmark, I talked to people who are just really passionate about coffee, and that's why they wanted to be part of Wheelies. In Lebanon, I met a wheeler who really just wanted to work long hours and earn more money. So for me, this is crucial in understanding how you can open up. Or if we go back and we actually look at the wheel again, we also have price. So how can you change your prices rather than dictating the prices? How can you make it open for people to ask them what they want to pay? If we see some of the airlines today out there, like Star Alliance, today, if you want to upgrade your seat, what you could do is you can put in a bet and say, hey, I want to pay 15,000 points for this. And then the alliance can look at it and say, yes, I take that bet. And yet I feel part of that, and I feel that they listen and open up for my suggestions. We've done something similar at the agency in the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, like everyone else, like we're doing right now, we're doing a webinar. And in the beginning, we would put a price on it. We say, hey, wait a moment, that would cost $30 or whatever. And we'd use discount codes and all that stuff. But then we said, hey, wait a moment, why are we not doing what we're preaching? How can we open up the price for everybody? And what in fact we did was we said, you decide the price. And then we told people the true cost of what we were doing and saying, if you pay $0, at some point we're going to go bankrupt because we can't live with no money. At 29 euros, it's actually a break even. At 49 euros, we're actually starting to earn money. And the interesting thing was we got more people signing up for the webinars, and we actually earned more money. And for the people who paid $0, we're actually able to convert 10% of them to either buying other products or actually paying us for the webinar. So these are ways that you can think about how you can move out from a typical we decide everything mindset to a you decide more. And why is this so important? Because big brands have a really difficult time getting this right. Because if you think about it, the strength with being a startup is that you can respond to people. You can talk to people like humans, not this corporate lingo that I have to deal with on a daily basis working with big brands. So I think this is really key in delivering your products and services. Plus, you engage in them early on. I think some of the mistakes I did, I started a startup years ago called Where Good Grows. And one of the dumb things I didn't do was I didn't reach enough out to the stakeholders and my customers. And in this way, you're in a constant dialogue with your stakeholders. So that opens up a lot of interesting input. And it also opens up for me to feel engaged and for me to feel part of the journey. If you, for example, take what is it called? Build a beer. I'm sure some of you know that. A really popular concept where you go in there and you can kind of customize your little teddy bear. Why is that concept so popular? Because you feel part of that creation, and then obviously adding that little heart to the teddy bear and giving it a name. And research again and again show that what you help build, you value higher. And again, if we look at Kickstarter, for example, it's part of that same thing, that you've been part of helping finance this, so you want that to succeed. And this also can happen on products, and I'll share one example from obviously a big brand, Lego. Sorry for throwing in a lot of Danish examples here, but obviously I always like bringing in other examples than just the usual kind of UK, US examples, because apparently those are the ones that we see each and every time. But what Lego has done, and I would have wished that existed when I was a kid. I was a big Lego fan. And if you think about Lego, in fact, it's also a transformative brand, because what they help is they build young and adult builders' creativity. They spark their imagination. And it's so interesting with transformative brands, so that they it works both internally and externally in the company. So for example, if you take a snack brand called Kind Snacks out of the US, what they talk about is kindness. And Daniel Lesevsky, the founder, talks about how we need more kindness in the world. And so they do random acts of kindness, where they do kind things around cities, etc. But it even works internally. So they do this survey each and every year, and 86% of the employees actually say that they feel more kind after starting to work at Kind Snacks. But so Lego is one of those brands. So they got their transformative promise right. They know that they have a clear role that they want to play in my life. But second, they also open up for the product and the young creators' creativity. So basically, what you can do at Lego Ideas is you can put up your model that you build, and if it got enough votes, 10,000 votes, it will actually turn into a real product, and a little bit of that profit will actually also go back to you. So even for a big brand like Lego, this is the thing they're experimenting with, but obviously you guys out there can do that much better. And even with distribution, where do you distribute your product? If you think about the car rental company, or what we want to call them today, Share Now, which was started by BMW and is now in quite a few cities, or if you take something like Lyft, if you think about how that completely disrupts the usual way you did do rentals, where you had to go to a specific place, you had to pick up the car, you had to pick up the bike. Right now, it's on my terms. So really, my clear message to you with the wheel is start doing business on people's terms, because it's fundamentally changing. Because the world that I'm maybe just a little bit lacking on the generational thing, but at least, I don't know how young you are on this call, but at least the younger parts of who is on this call grew up in a different world than I did, where everything is today customizable. I click on a button. So it's pretty easy for you guys to do that and utilize that. So fundamentally, leadership is changing. And if you want to claim to be an impactful brand or a sustainable brand, know that that's a hygiene factor today, and it's extremely difficult to own that. So you can shout about it, but what's the real proof point? How can I trust you? How can I know that you're authentic? You might have the right consciousness. You might be mindful about what you're doing, but by the end of the day, how do I know? Secondly, a lot of people say always, oh, actions, commitments. But it's really hard to deliver those actions, commitments, so they stand out. If you have such a great world-changing product, you don't need to worry about storytelling. And I actually don't like commitments, because if you think about it, it's almost like not having a choice. And this is also something that's good for you, because a lot of the big brands out there go about it and talk about 2030, 2040 or whatever. So think about it, and I saw this analogy, but let's say I've done this little webinar, and then I'm finished, and I come home and I take my girlfriend and being unfaithful. I'm always obviously super pissed about it. I'm angry. And then she looks at me and she says, Thomas, you know what? Yeah, that was bad. I screwed up, my mistake. But you know what? Towards 2030, I'm going to be a little more faithful each year until 2030, we're full on back together. And it's kind of the same way I look at these corporate commitments. We have a choice right now, and it's it's really up to you to make me part of that. So where I think the key to the real point is when you help people live healthier lives, if you push me towards plant-based living, as Oster did, or if you help me become more conscious, or we just came out of Pride Month, right? I'm so tired of hearing these brands talk about diversity, because the one thing I want help with is finding some of my own biases or some of my own stereotypes. If you as a brand can help me do that, that's amazing. And there's so many unused roles out there that you can take as a brand. So for me, real leadership is really about making people achieve amazing things. And you do that by asking the one key question: who can you help people become? But this is not just about business. It's about driving meaningful growth going forward, but it's also about creating the much needed change that has to happen right now, because we're faced with a climate emergency and what seems like insurmountable social challenges. I'm not sure how many of you have read the book, The Great Acceleration. I'm not going to say that that's a good Sunday reading book because it's going to make you depressed, but it also gives you a sense of urgency. And for all your impact businesses out there, it obviously shows there are lots of things that needs to be fixed. But that can only be fixed if each and every one take part in that change. And if you can help me and others move towards and take part in that much needed change. What tends to happen again and again and again is that I see brands and startups pitching themselves as world-saving heroes and use language that I, in many aspects, think are crazy talk. I mean, if you take Patagonia, for example, sorry to all the Patagonia fans out there, they say we're in the business to save our home planet. If one of my friends told me that, I would probably think he or she has gotten a little bit bonkers. So beware of that language. Beware of pitching yourself as a hero. I know that I started the presentation quite provokingly with a picture of Jesus. So let's end this presentation with a picture of Jesus as well. Because the thing about change is that if you really want to change the world, you obviously need to begin with changing yourselves. And you can only do that if you don't create brands that are heroes, but in fact, help each and every one of us become heroes in our lives. So that was a little bit of what I had to share with you here today in terms of creating meaningful growth going forward, and in terms of how to create a successful startup with two very simple tools, the arrow and the wheel, really putting people first and planet first, because I think this is what needs to happen. And we're all obviously super excited to answer your questions in a while, but also just encourage you, if you want to follow more on my change journey and some of the things that we're doing, please do that. And we're going to do a random draw of an audio book that we just launched. So the Hero Trap that you saw a bit earlier, where you can learn a little bit more about the tools. But it's been such a pleasure. I'm actually super psyched about hearing some of your questions. So let's jump to the Q&A here, and I'm going to jump out of the presentation. We're going to go back to that in a little while again. So Abby, what do we have? What exciting questions do we have?
Great. So the first one we have is, what tips would you like? No, wait, let me just read this properly. That's a lot. There we go. What tips would you give to an impact business that is just starting up to avoid making the mistakes you described? It can be challenging to prioritize this aspect at the beginning.
I think, and this is obviously my opinion, and I'm a little bit biased since I'm for the most part of the business of building meaningful brands, and obviously have a strong belief in communication. But obviously products and services are incredibly important, and I know that a lot of you are obviously trying to get your beta out there and get a working prototype to function. But don't forget the story. The story is in fact a key part of differentiating you, of the success that you're going to create. And I know this might sound like a really stupid or banal example, but if you take Yahoo and Google, both search engines, I think Google was just much better at creating a simplified product that I could understand what they were about. They knew what role they wanted to play in my life, whereas I thought, wait, Yahoo, it's all over the place. So I would really encourage you to look at those key tools that I shared with you, and really the one key question I want you is really, who can help people come think about that? Because by the end of the day, why you buy things is because they deliver meaning to you. And a lot of startups, I think, go wrong because they don't know what meaning they're delivering. And in one, I call it a who void. Like, you have lots of competitors in a space, most likely. But if you can be the one that has the most clear, exciting, distinct roles to play, like for example, Bumble, who would think that we would be needing any new dating apps? They found a who would. They found something exciting, new, and fresh. So I would really do this key piece of work because I think, especially in the beginning, this is where you can really shape it and have it and be excited about it. Plus, it also informs a lot of the decisions you've got to take further down the road. So that's a bit of a long answer. I'll do a shorter answer next time.
That's fine. It's so interesting to listen to. Thank you for answering that question. Okay, next one we have. How do you distinguish between a brand that is greenwashing and a brand that is just in the beginning of the impact journey, but is not sustainable on all aspects?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a question I get all the time. It's a tough call, you know. I think, and specifically because it's changing so fast. I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, I started really working uh, full time on sustainability and impact and stuff like that 12 years ago from marketing perspective. Before that, I worked in traditional advertising for about 10 years. I think it's changing all the time. What used to be okay might not be okay tomorrow.
Mm.
What used to be fine in the context of sustainability, see the whole conversations now around net positive, about regenerative businesses. Earlier, it was enough to minimize the bad impact you were doing. Now you actually have to sort it out as well. Like when Microsoft goes out and say, wait, by 2050, we're going to clean up all the mess we did. We're not just going to minimize, we're going to clean up all the mess we did. So it's difficult. And that's also why I had to, you know, from the first book to the second book, really think hard about what's the key delivery point, because there's so many messages out there and labels and stuff like that. But I think as a startup, I think be honest. I mean, you can't fight every battle. I mean, you know, if you take things like packaging, maybe you can't get the right packaging there, but really think about the opportunities and the challenges and some of the competition out there. I mean, if you look at Oatly, for example, the oat milk brand, how fast they grew, it was really just because they had a really simple product delivered. Did they get everything right in the beginning? No, they didn't. So don't be too hard on yourself, but be honest about those challenges that you're facing. Because I think by the end of the day, we're gonna forgive you if you say, you know, I'm really sad about we couldn't do this packaging, but it would cost more. Or as I said with the wheel, give people a choice. I remember my first book, Good Advertising. I really wanted the publisher to do two versions because, in fact, this is crazy. Like if we had to create a properly produced, sustainable book, it would cost £15 more,
Mm.
which is quite a substantial extra cost to that book. So what I wanted to do was do two books. I wanted to do the sustainable one and the traditional one, but obviously the publisher didn't buy into that. But you can give people a choice. Do you want the sustainable packaging delivered? Yeah, that's fine. It's going to cost you $10 more, or not. Then that's also fine.
Yeah, that's true. And I think being honest is also something, of course, that not only will consumers understand, but then they can also go on the journey with you. They can understand more about why you're doing things the way you're doing it. And then you even build stronger connections. So yeah, really like that.
I agree. You know, I'm like, as long as we realize that, you know, I got provoked to write the last book because I realized how difficult it was to create change in my own life. I screw up all the time. You know, honestly, I'm like, then you know, I've been doing a party and then, you know, you're cleaning up the next day and, you know, yes, you should sort the cans and you should do all of that, but then, oh, you know, it's easier. And then so it's a journey, right? And I think realizing that and be honest about that, it's fine. Don't be like the big brands and be too corporate. Rather be in eye height, personal, honest. That's interesting.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Do you think a fear of being perceived as greenwashing is a barrier for brands to talk about the good stuff they are doing?
Definitely, most definitely. I think a lot of we do work with a lot of very big brands, and I think it's a fear, and they want to validate that what they're doing is right. I mean, if you look at the whole labeling jungle, I think a lot of that is basically nonsense, right?
Mm,
Because you know you can't buy trust with a label. I
mm,
mean, either you trust people or you don't. I mean, if I go down to my little ice cream maker down on the corner, I don't need all those trust labels because I trust the guy. He says it's organic. It's like, you know, yeah, I trust him. When it comes to Ben and Jerry's, I'm like, do I really trust them? And I think that can work as an advantage for startups as well. That you have the advantage. I mean, one of the guys I interviewed was the global CMO of Procter and Gamble. It's the world's biggest, second biggest fast moving consumer goods company. They do everything from diapers to washing detergents, etc. And he said, "Isn't it interesting that we are a 180-year-old company? We have some of the best research and scientists employed, yet people still trust an 18-year-old kid that does soap out of his mom's basement."
Mm.
And it really shows the trust gap, and it really shows the opportunity that you have as an impact business in attracting customers in an authentic, meaningful way.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. What do you think of Oatly's recent lawsuit and how that is harming their brand? As many are saying they're doing they're doing exactly the opposite of what they are saying. Do you think they expected that kind of backlash, or they are confident their brand is strong enough to survive this?
Oh gosh, yeah, and the little the recent round of investments as well didn't really look good for them either. I mean, it's it's a shame. I think it's wrong because they're trying to behave like big guys. It's only like the guys like McDonald's who, sues people, and it's just not behaving right. I think it's not aligned with what that brand is about. I think a lot of the early attraction they got was in fact that they talk like humans. I mean, if you look at the adverts, they're like super honest, down to earth, and yeah. So I don't think it's a brand, and I think it's a big mistake for them, unfortunately.
Let's see what happens with this going forward.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Okay. What can brands do after being called out as greenwashing? There's a lot of greenwashing questions in here.
There is a lot of greenwashing, yeah.
Do you think it's beneficial to acknowledge that critique, do you think it's beneficial to own their mistakes and show that they still want to do better, or to just disregard it?
I don't think there's really one size fit all strategy here. I think there's different ways to go about it. I think sometimes, brands go out there and they apologize and like, oh, we didn't mean that or whatever. I think sometimes you can also stand your ground and say, listen out, why we do what we do is because of XYZ, because we believe XYZ, and we are aware of the challenges. I think in the beginning, and this is true, I think that journalists weren't that well equipped to understand sustainability, in fact. So, and they love their front page of stories. And sometimes I got to say that some of the companies that I worked with that's been accused of greenwashing, I felt was maybe not a completely fair critique, because if you look at the industry as a whole, you could probably look at all the other ones as well. And it's an industry-wide problem. And I think that's an issue when you have journalists that might not cover that bigger story. But in general, I think when you're caught out, it's like everything else. Always remember that branding and communication is human relationships, and that's why I also shared that really banal story about my girlfriend being unfaithful. Because by the end of the day, if you screw up, what is it that you do? I mean, you can only bring flowers so many times. You want to see change behaviors, and I think the same thing goes for brands. You can apologize, or you can go out really forcefully and say, yes, we screwed up. We didn't know that we had that issue in the supply chain. We didn't know that there was, child labor in the tea plantation. But what we're going to do now is X, Y, Z, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to take the beatings. And here is how you can follow that what we say is true. So I think there's a number of ways that you can go about that. But I think as a startup, and especially as an impact business, you have so much trust to begin with. And what I would do is, within a specific industry, I would really just look hard at some of the pain points from some of your bigger competitors in that space, and then own that. make it work against them. I mean, you're the Davids and you're faced with the Goliaths. And the thing is, each and every time, like if you look at, now we talked a bit about P&G, but if you look at Head and Shoulders, and they launched this with Beach Plastics a while back. I mean, doing that as a big corporation demands so much hard work because it's in quantities that are like crazy. Whereas when you're a startup, you're dealing with smaller quantities and you can do amazing stuff when you're small. And I think you've got to use that as your strength, and communicate about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. But quite an interesting question from Catherine. Thank you for sharing this. It says, how do you brand benefit, balance, and sustainability? That is social enterprise without alienating those who have been brainwashed to fear socialism like the American market.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Really, really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a general shift in society that green used to be some way an elitist movement. In some aspects, that was about, this is what we believe in, this is what the climate movement is about, for example, or the B Corp movement, this is what it's about. I think right now there are a lot of different truths out there. I mean, when we have covers on the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, about conscious capitalism, it does show there's a bigger shift in society that's happening right now. When you have big CEOs talking about these things that they definitely did talk about 5 years ago, I think we're seeing a bigger shift. So yes, in the US, there are unfortunately a very polarized, politically charged environment. That's tough. I mean, an example is that when IKEA went in there and they went full on renewable with solar panels and windmills and stuff, it was seen as a political move supporting the Democrats. Whereas you're like, how has that anything to do with anything? So obviously there is a political climate that one needs to be very aware about. I'm not a big fan of, now it becomes very personal, but I'm not a big fan of brand activism where you become this sort of self-important missionary, like, I want to change the world, I want to do this and that. Because I think sustainability for me personally is about inclusiveness. It's not about alienating people. It's not about pointing fingers at others and saying you're wrong. For me, it's like when you were going to a math class, and in the front seat you would have all the good students that got math and stuff, and then in the back seat you would have the sort of unruly types that didn't really get math. And I think, why would we point fingers at the people who might not get climate change or who might think differently about things? I think we ought to help them. And I think there might be market opportunities in attracting people like that to things that they might see as socialism. At one point, I remember we had a workshop around what I called eco macho, because a lot of brands out there used a very feminine visual thing around sustainability, flowers, plants, birds, that stuff. How could you do something that looked a little bit more manly? So there's a lot of opportunities in thinking about the visual language and thinking about how you work with values and how you maybe avoid being seen as a socialist enterprise. I mean, for me, it's common sense. If you can create a great business that creates meaningful growth and that's not harming people and planet, I mean, that should be a win for all.
Absolutely. Thanks for answering that, Thomas. Cool. So that's pretty much all the time we have for the Q&A. So Thomas, if you could share the presentation again, and we can go through the final few slides. We have...
I will.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm super excited to let you all know that we've actually partnered up with Thomas to provide an exclusive workshop for members of our community. And this is all about creating a meaningful brand narrative. So as Thomas has talked about earlier today, through this workshop, you will be working with Thomas and other members of the group to find your who voids, who can you help people become, and also to find your transformative promise as well. And so during that workshop, you'll of course get feedback from Thomas, and also learn from others in the group. And it takes place on Wednesday, July 28th from 12 to 3. So yes, it's available for a select number of the 5 community. And what you'll need to do is to just register your interest, filling out a form that will be sent to you in the follow-up email. And yeah, exactly. So what's next? Everything will be sent to you shortly today. Please check out the 5 Community Facebook group or sign up to our newsletter if you haven't already to stay up to date on upcoming events like these and more initiatives for sustainability-driven entrepreneurs. And finally, please remember to pitch your project to 5 if you haven't already. We are always looking for sustainability businesses, projects, etc. to support. And you can find the link on our website. And there's one more slide. Thank you for joining. And thank you, Thomas. This was a good
Thank you all.
And we'll see you all next.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you, Famida.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thank you all.